If the whole Earth were to be seriously affected by a single natural disaster, where do you think it would come from? While many people may say an asteroid, let's take you to a location on the Earth that is an even likelier candidate. That will take us to the US, which you can see on the map in red. We will zero in on 3 neighboring states, Wyoming in yellow, Montana in green, and Idaho in blue. The exact location is showing in white, and as you may have now guessed, it is the Yellowstone National Park. Many people see Yellowstone National Park as a marvel of nature to be visited and admired. But what the millions of visitors don't know is that they are standing on a site that can change the world in a matter of hours and force humans to cope with extreme weather conditions. In this video, we bring you terrifying new discoveries scientists have found in the Yellowstone National Park that affect you anywhere that you are on Earth. When the visitors of Yellowstone in the US tried to report what they saw on their visit, their local newspapers accused them of lying and said they were not in the business of printing fiction. Nobody could believe that the tales told by these mesmerized visitors to what is now known as Yellowstone National Park, the first of its kind in the US. From colorful hot springs to mud pots, breathtaking waterfalls to geysers, it's easy to see from the newspaper's point of view because nowhere else on Earth packs as much wonder in a single place as Yellowstone. Everybody sees something that fascinates them. Yellowstone was established in 1872, making it exactly 150 years old, and it has remained one of the most visited national parks in the country, welcoming almost 5 million visitors last year from every part of the world. The park sits in 3 states but is mostly located in the state of Wyoming. It spans about 3,500 square miles, which means countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Azerbaijan are only about 10 times larger. Yellowstone will swallow sovereign states like Brunei, Luxembourg, and Northern Cyprus, and nearly fit Lebanon and Gambia. Yellowstone National Park is actually located on top of a dormant volcano, but visitors can enjoy the geysers which are more concentrated here than in any other place on Earth. Other wonders abounding in Yellowstone include the Yellowstone Grand Canyon, wildlife including America's largest buffalo herd, grizzly bears, and wolves. Approximately 50% of the world's hydrothermal features are at Yellowstone National Park, creating an effect that makes the ground appear to be on fire. The most famous of all these geysers is Old Faithful, one of the most popular and recognized natural wonders in the United States and known the world over. When you plan a visit to Yellowstone, you had better come with your camera. But there is something else that scientists have found out about this park that you should know even if you don't plan to come to visit. This is because no matter where you are, the discovery will affect you and your family. Remember, Yellowstone sits on a dormant volcano. Well, dormant volcanoes sometimes become active and explode. So a Yellowstone volcanic eruption is a distinct possibility. So what happens if Yellowstone erupts today? It is going to be ugly for everyone. To really understand what we are dealing with here, we will go back about 2.1 million years when it erupted for the first time and about 1.3 million years when it erupted again to devastating consequences. In each of these cataclysmic events, Yellowstone sent up enormous volumes of magma from the surface and into the atmosphere. The eruption contained mixtures of red-hot pumice, volcanic ash, or small, jagged fragments of volcanic glass and rock. It also included gas spreading as pyroclastic flows in every direction. As a result of the rapid withdrawal of such large volumes of magma from the subsurface, the ground collapsed and swallowed overlying mountains. The end result was broad, cauldron-shaped volcanic depressions called calderas. Scientists have discovered that the first eruption created a widespread volcanic deposit known as the Huckleberry Ridge Tuff. You can still view this at Golden Gate, south of Mammoth Hot Springs. This titanic event, one of the 5 largest individual volcanic eruptions known anywhere on the Earth, formed a caldera spanning more than 60 miles, or 100 kilometers across. The second eruption was similar but on a smaller scale, although it was still huge and caused havoc in faraway places. It also formed a caldera known as the Henry's Fork Caldera, located in the area of Island Park, west of Yellowstone National Park. You can also see the deposits from this event today, called the Mesa Falls Tuff. There was another eruption leading to a caldera about 640,000 years ago, as scientists have discovered. This one, about 100 times bigger than Pinatubo and 10 times more powerful than Tambora, created the 35-mile wide, 50-mile long Yellowstone caldera. The pyroclastic flows from this eruption left thick volcanic deposits known as the lava creek tuff, which can be seen in the south-facing cliffs east of Madison, where they form the north wall of the caldera. It caused huge volumes of volcanic ash to blast high into the atmosphere. Evidence of this eruption as ash deposits can still be found in places as distant from Yellowstone as Iowa, Louisiana, and California. But what was the cause of these explosions? They happened when large volumes of rhyolitic magma accumulated at shallow levels in the Earth's crust, up to 3 miles or 5 kilometers below the surface. This highly viscous magma was charged with dissolved gas and then moved upward. The movement placed lots of stress on the crust and generated earthquakes. When the magma neared the surface and the pressure decreased, the gas expansion triggered violent explosions. Other eruptions where rhyolite played a part and formed calderas include the Katmai National Park, Alaska, which formed in an eruption as recent as 1912. In fact, the Alaskan eruption is a somber reminder that Yellowstone can come to life again. Meanwhile, eruptions are not the only devastating acts that Yellowstone is capable of. The national park can also cause a lava flow, although the effects would not be as dire as the previously mentioned lava flow. In fact, since the last eruption, about 640,000 years ago, scientists discovered that Yellowstone has witnessed about 30 bouts of lava eruptions. Many visitors hike or drive over the lavas, some of which were deposited more than 160,000 years ago. Some of these lava deposits are very thick and large, covering up to 130 square miles, which is about double the size of Washington, D.C. These lava flows are extremely dangerous because they just flow over everything. They can cover several hundred feet per day for months or even several years. Everything in their path gets destroyed completely. Scientists have modeled what a supereruption in Yellowstone will cause to the Earth. Supervolcanoes are 1,000 times more powerful and explosive than your standard volcanic eruption, so you can imagine the carnage. They eject not less than 240 cubic miles of materials and keep spilling for months. The main damage would come from volcanic ash, a combination of splintered rock and glass which will spurt miles into the air and scatter around the country. A supereruption can easily bury the northern Rockies in 3 feet of ash. This will devastate large swathes of Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, Montana, and Utah, the ground zero in this scenario. Volcanic ash is extremely dangerous as it can wipe out humans, animals, plants, and crush buildings. You need just a few inches of ash to destroy farms, clog up roadways, block sewer lines, and so forth. It is also enough to cause serious respiratory problems and destroy electric transformers everywhere. Even air travel will have to pause because it won't be safe. Can you imagine the problems caused by the grid shutting down? Many industries that support many other industries will shut down, likely triggering an economic collapse. The disruption of air travel will also prevent the movement of passengers and goods, which will hamper the world economy. This eruption may kill as many as 90,000 people in the immediate vicinity. Contributing to the death toll is the fact that the ash would block off all points of entry from the ground, and the spread of ash and gases into the atmosphere would stop most air travel, as previously mentioned. This would seriously limit rescue operations. But that is not even the end, because just as frightening is the nuclear winter that some experts say could blanket the US and other parts of the world. These sulfuric gases released from the volcano would spring into the atmosphere and mix with the planet's water vapor. The resulting haze of gas that could cover the country will dim the sunlight and also cool temperatures. Do you know what falling temperatures mean? Hunger, because it would wreck our food supply, decimating crops and throwing the food chain out of whack by leaving those at the bottom with little to eat. This wouldn't be different from what many climate scientists believe happened in CE 535 after a supervolcano erupted in Java. In fact, in Europe and North America, 1816 was known as the year without a summer because of global cooling caused by the 1815 eruption of Tambora in Indonesia. It caused a large number of crops to fail due to the cooling caused by the eruption. The more recent 1991 eruption of Pinatubo in the Philippines also caused global cooling, perhaps by an average of about 1 degree Fahrenheit during the following year. Interestingly, there will be warning signs before the worst of the eruption hits us. We'd likely first see intense seismic activity across the entire park. It could take weeks or months for those earthquakes to break up the rocks above the magma before an eruption. So whatever we can do to brace for the impact in the few weeks or months could help or not. Speaking of preparation, is there anything we can do to prevent or avert a destructive Yellowstone eruption? What if we attempt to drill into the Yellowstone to kind of relieve the pressure and prevent an eruption? A lot of things needed to be considered here before we start moving drilling rigs to the site. Of course, limited scientific drilling for research can help scientists better understand magmatic and hydrothermal or hot water systems. But when it comes to drilling to mitigate a volcanic threat, that is an entirely different discussion. We are not even sure of what all the consequences would be. There is also the high costs of such a venture, and the government has to consider the potentially severe environmental impacts. That is not to talk of the enormous technological difficulties in drilling through hot, mushy rock. Basically, at near magmatic temperatures and pressures, any hole you dig would rapidly become sealed by minerals crystallizing from the natural fluids that are present at those depths. Additionally, Yellowstone National Park is protected from geothermal resource development. World-famous features like the Old Faithful Geyser and Grand Prismatic Spring depend on heat provided by the magma chamber deep below Yellowstone's surface, so you can't just start digging. Any allowed geothermal extraction would lower the pressure on the existing geysers and hot springs and permanently change their behavior. They may even disappear completely. Drilling in Yellowstone in an attempt to release pressure could even have the opposite effect. Scientific studies have shown that depressurization is one of the factors that drives magma toward the surface to erupt, so trying to cool and depressurize magma systems would have many unintended negative consequences, including making an eruption more likely or hastening it. Since there is basically nothing we can do to stop Yellowstone from erupting, what can you do to protect yourself or increase your chances of survival? Much of that depends on how close is where you live to Yellowstone. Also, the immediate dangers happen during the explosion itself in the first few days. If you are close enough, you will face two major challenges: your roof caving in under the weight of the ash and killing you, or if you survive the destruction of your home, being without shelter and exposed and breathing in volcanic ash will do you in. The first thing is to ensure your roof does not collapse on you, although just how to do that is a big problem. Then you must ensure you do not breathe in the ash or let it get into your eyes. You may want to invest in industry-grade respiratory filters to filter out the harmful substances in the air that you will breathe when outdoors. You also need to wear military-grade eye protection goggles when you're outside, or simply stay indoors where your air is purified. Since the best plan is to stay indoors provided your abode does not collapse, you need to stock up on everything: food, water, fuel, electricity, drugs, and much more. You may be able to survive until you're rescued. However, the best survival plan is to evacuate the affected areas at the first warning. Meanwhile, even though a possible eruption is more intriguing and grabs the news headlines easily, there is another event that can make visitors to Yellowstone shake. Yes, literally shake, because many earthquakes happen in Yellowstone. In fact, in a typical year, Yellowstone National Park and its immediate environment witness between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes per year. So at least about 3 earthquakes shake Yellowstone every day on average, making the park one of the most seismically active areas in the US. Many of the earthquakes at Yellowstone come from regional faults caused by crustal stretching and mountain building. For example, major faults along the Teton, Madison, and Gallatin ranges pass through the park and likely existed long before the beginning of volcanism there. Any movements along these faults can cause significant earthquakes. The last major earthquake in Yellowstone's recent history occurred near Hebgen Lake, which is just west of the park. It was a 7.5 magnitude earthquake and caused damages equivalent to $70 million. And it didn't just cause property damage, as it killed 28 people. Most of the casualties resulted from a landslide triggered by the quake. Meanwhile, if you keep to the Yellowstone caldera, you would likely be safe from large earthquakes like the Hebgen Lake event. This is because geologists discovered they are unlikely to occur within the Yellowstone caldera itself. The subsurface temperatures there are high, and this weakens the bedrock and makes it less able to rupture. But that doesn't mean you are completely safe, because quakes within the caldera can be as large as magnitude 6.5. What is more, Yellowstone is vulnerable to even distant earthquakes. For example, in 2002, the magnitude 7.9 Denali Fault earthquake that struck central Alaska, 1,900 miles or 3,100 kilometers northwest of Yellowstone, touched the active Yellowstone volcanic and hydrothermal system and triggered hundreds of small earthquakes there. The region's hydrothermal system is highly sensitive to quakes and undergoes significant changes in their wake. Earthquakes may have the potential to cause Yellowstone's hot water system to destabilize and produce explosive hydrothermal eruptions. Yellowstone celebrated its 150th year of being open, but it was on a sad note. The park opened the high season with historic flooding that caused damage. Sadly, scientists warned the park management should brace for more flooding like this in the future. So what is going on in Yellowstone with flooding? In the second week of June 2022, an atmospheric river, which is a narrow band of tropical moisture, soaked the Pacific Northwest before dumping several inches of rain on northern Wyoming and southern Montana. This led to the closure of the park, and more than 10,000 visitors had to be evacuated. Many cars were stranded, campsites were flooded, roads washed out, and rocks were blocking the way. The management of Yellowstone was grateful for the cool, wet spring earlier that brought much-needed water to the region. The area had been experiencing drought conditions, so the water was welcome. However, things began to change in April and started raising alarm bells as higher than median precipitation in the Yellowstone Basin helped build up the snowpack on the ground, which had increased to nearly the 30-year median by May. Between June 10th and 13th, the Absaroka and Beartooth ranges received between 0.8 and 5 inches of rain, which combined with 2 to nearly 5 inches of snowmelt. The combination of rain and snowmelt, amounting to 4 to 9 inches or 10 to 22 centimeters of rain, flowed over already damp soils which were unable to soak the water. The runoff deluged the Yellowstone, Stillwater, and Clarks Fork rivers and their tributaries. The Yellowstone River reached a maximum depth of 13.88 feet on June 13, 2022, which broke the previous record of 11.5 feet set in 1918. The river discharged a record 51,400 cubic feet per second of water on the same day, significantly more than the previous record discharge of 32,200 cubic feet per second attained in 1996. The rising floodwaters completely cut off large sections of the park by washing out roads and bridges. It swept away multiple houses and flooded hundreds more. Rock Creek also destroyed several bridges and flooded businesses in the downtown of Red Lodge, Montana. Residents of several towns were hit with power outages and polluted drinking water supplies due to the flood. While the establishment of the park took place 150 years ago, how long have people been inhabiting the park? The answer, according to scientists, is at least 11,000 years. In fact, the park has several names given to it by the different tribes that have lived there. For example, the Crow referred to it as the land of the burning ground or land of vapors, while it was many smoke to the Blackfeet people. The Flatheads tribe know it as smoke from the ground, while the Kiowa called it the place of hot water. However, more than just people from these tribes have made a living off the park in the past in its long history of habitation. In fact, if you hike along some of the modern trails, you are simply following in the footsteps of the indigenous tribes that created the corridors dating all the way back to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age when humans first appeared in the archaeological record in North America. Yellowstone attracted commerce thanks to its natural resources. It was the source of an important trade item in ancient times, obsidian. If you are wondering what obsidian is, it is an amorphous volcanic glass, a product of rapid quenching of magma upon eruption onto the surface. This item might not mean much to you today, but it was a prized commodity because it was used in creating arrowheads and spear tips. There is evidence that for over 11,000 years, the Obsidian Cliff, located in the Norris Mammoth Corridor just north of Roaring Mountain, was a buzzing crossroads of commerce for indigenous people. This resource drew nearby tribes into the boundaries of Yellowstone, and modern archaeological efforts have documented over 50 quarry sites on Obsidian Cliff. To date, obsidian quarried and napped from Obsidian Cliff has been found as far east as Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Ontario. Some evidence even suggests that certain tribes, such as the Hopewell people, trekked 2,000 miles from their home along the Scioto River in Ohio just to mine the prized obsidian in Yellowstone. But why are indigenous people no longer found throughout Yellowstone? Even though the US government agreed that the Yellowstone region belonged to the various local indigenous tribes, the establishment of Yellowstone National Park in 1872 more or less signaled the end of indigenous occupation within the park's boundaries. Park Superintendent Colonel P.W. Norris was determined to remove indigenous people from the newly established park because he felt they discouraged tourism. Rumors were spread that indigenous tribes feared the geysers and hot springs of Yellowstone. Many died of smallpox, and the remaining few eventually made their way to the Wind River Reservation, established southeast of the park. One of the most tragic events to happen in Yellowstone was captured on camera, but the park authorities won't let the footage be shared. If you've been to Yellowstone or seen pictures, you've probably admired the colorful hot springs that dot the park. However, one thing you should know about these waters is that you must never fall inside. A visitor, who we shall not name, learned this lesson too late and paid with his life. The man was visiting Yellowstone with his sister when he fell into a hot spring. Reports show the pair went to an unauthorized part of the park near the Norris Geyser. One of the chief deputy rangers suggested the siblings were looking for a place where they could soak in the water. The tragedy happened when the victim reached down to check the spring's temperature and slipped, ending up inside the water. When rescuers found his body, they could not retrieve it immediately because of a lightning storm. By the time they returned the next day, the body had disappeared, dissolved completely in the highly acidic water. There is acidic water in Yellowstone's geysers and springs because they come from deep underground, where they pick up sulfuric acid before reaching the surface. The sulfuric content is courtesy of microorganisms that break down hydrogen sulfide in rocks and soils. But how did the park authorities end up with footage of the tragedy? The victim's sister was recording on her cell phone when her brother fell into the pool. There are other ways to die in Yellowstone, including falling off a cliff and tubing the powerful Yellowstone River, where rafting is banned due to safety concerns. However, the vast majority of Yellowstone visitors make it back home safely, but it's important to pay attention to safety instructions in the park. But of course, Yellowstone is not the only place where volcanic eruptions with global impact can take place. For example, Krakatoa is still active and can still erupt again. The last time it erupted, the whole world felt it, but the people closest paid the highest price, which is why a warning system is crucial for the area surrounding Krakatoa. Krakatoa is located in Indonesia, and its last fiery explosion claimed the lives of more than 36,000 people, making it one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in modern times. It all started with little warning signs like billowing smoke and small, seemingly insignificant earthquakes. These warnings were actually not ignored, but instead of fleeing, the people included the events in festival celebrations. In fact, the natives thought Krakatoa's natural fireworks were a mere lucky surprise, but that would prove to be a grave mistake. Shortly thereafter, the blast sent a cloud of debris 15 miles into the air. The eruption itself was so loud that it was heard some 2,800 miles away in Australia. It was also heard 3,000 miles away on the islands of Rodriguez, where it was described as the distant roar of heavy guns. It was loud enough to shatter the eardrums of people close by. The magma chamber ruptured and allowed seawater to come into contact with the burning hot lava. This created flashes of superheated steam that moved at over 60 miles per hour. The first set of victims stood no chance. The amount of ash and debris was so great that they cast darkness that didn't go away for 3 days. As the volcano collapsed into the sea, it generated a tsunami 37 meters high, tall enough to submerge a 6-story building. And as the wave raced along the shoreline of the Sunda Strait, it destroyed 300 towns and villages. The wave is said to have traveled around the globe 3.5 times at astonishing speed, causing tsunamis as far as South Africa and flinging huge chunks of coral reef onto the land as it went. Some of these sections of coral weighed as much as 600 tons. According to scientists, the Krakatoa eruption caused the oceans to cool for as much as a century. In fact, had the volcano not erupted, sea levels might be much higher than what we have today. 45 years later, Krakatoa was at it again. With sporadic eruptions underwater, some parts of the original volcano shot to the surface and formed an entirely new island, appropriately named Anak Krakatoa, or Child of Krakatoa. But Anak Krakatoa would lose part of its flanks in 2018 when Krakatoa erupted again. This small eruption caused another tsunami that killed 437 people, injured 32,000, and displaced more than 16,000 people. Let's hear what you think of Yellowstone National Park in the comments section below.